Hello and welcome to the week that really was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for this week ending the 4th of October 2024. It is budget week. Sarah, I am surprised that you are not here joining us with a fresh necklace and fur coat because you'll be so rich after what's happened this week. Are you counting your money like what do you call that duck that was very rich? Do you know the one?
Yeah, was
It was a
that?
cartoon when we were younger.
Yeah.
Scrooge McDuck, I think was his name.
Something like that. Um, no, I definitely. I mean, I have three children, so I get a good benefit from the double payments of children's allowance. It'll help tremendously with Christmas. And there was a couple of other bits and bobs. On the positive side, I will say that because I come from a position where I think very strongly that we should be encouraging people to have children and making it easier and easier to have children, I think some of the payments for people who have babies and stuff like that was good. I mean, it's obviously not enough, but it's something. It's a gesture at the very least. Um, I mean, like it's hard to criticize a giveaway budget. I mean, is there things that could have been there for sure? But I was driving around the other day and I actually had quite a long drive and I was listening to the Sinn Féin finance spokesperson's speech in response to the budget, and it was just so flat because you can especially from a Sinn Féin point of view because they're all for giving money away to everybody. So he struggled tremendously to come in. It was a kind of a you know very generic speech about giving out about everything and nothing. So I think it's hard to criticize that budget. There's good stuff in it. The problem is, you know, the issues that I have with the government, and you and I were talking about this the other day, like not everything is wrong and there are some things that work really well. But the issue that I have with the government is about, amongst others, is about how they spend money on infrastructure projects or small projects and how they do other things. And this budget was, fine.
Yeah, I don't think it's hard to criticize the budget. I know where you're coming from. I think if you're looking at it from the perspective of like your bank account, it's not hard to criticize the budget. My own bank account will be better next year as a result of this budget. Myself and my wife will benefit, like many families, to the tune of at least €2,000. So if you're just looking at it from a cash perspective, great. But politics is not supposed to be about that. It's supposed to be about looking after the long-term future of the country. And I don't think it's hard to criticize the budget. Like I have just had, for the disclosure of the viewers, just before we started this podcast, a Fine Gael canvasser knocked on my door. Here's the proof.
Literally,
Look.
while I was sitting here listening to it in the background.
Yes. Sarah had to listen. And this poor chap, he came to my door and he did the spiel and he said, look, we need a Fine Gael TD here in North Tipperary. We have no Fine Gael TD in North Tipperary because Michael Lowry is the Fine Gael TD for North Tipperary. He's just not in Fine Gael anymore because he's corrupt. Now, the guy said to me, the country is better off as a result of the budget. You're better off. And I started off, Sarah, you heard me. I was fairly polite. I said, yeah, it is. But the gates at the Oireachtas cost 48 grand to fix. The bike shed cost 336 grand. The children's hospital's running out of control. And then he said to me, this guy, he said, yeah, but sure, the government doesn't do that now. That's the civil service. And I lost my temper. Now, I shouldn't have lost my temper, Sarah. I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have shouted at him. But I shouted at him because the whole point of having a government is to run the civil service and to keep it in line. And I shouted at him and I told him to leave my property.
I know.
Which I shouldn't have done.
Spare thought for me. You thought you were out getting an Amazon delivery. I was like, what has the Amazon delivery driver done? Yeah, yes. Go on.
But I don't think it's difficult to criticize this budget because this is, and Kevin Myers wrote this in the piece for today on Gript. This is drunk Uncle Fianna Fáil back again with kind of like Fine Gael at the bar with them, and they've decided now there's an election coming up. There's a lot of people who aren't that enthused by the government's record, so we'll just throw money at them and bribe them. That's what it is. It's not a budget about the long-term health of the country. It's not a budget about the long-term infrastructural abilities of the country to improve. It's not their government's own Independent Fiscal Advisory Council says this budget will increase inflation and increase the cost of living for families by at least €1,000 next year. So there's half of what they've given me gone already and probably the other half to go shortly thereafter. It was just a budget of throwing money at people in the hopes that they might not notice what's actually happened in the country. It was a disgusting, cynical use of the taxpayers' money to bribe the taxpayer. That's my criticism of it. And for all that, I'll still take my $2,000. I'll be the hypocrite. I'll take my $2,000 that the government are giving me, and I'll pocket it, because what else have they done for me?
Well,
That's where I come from on it.
You're hardly going to give it back. And also, again, getting into the changing the manner in which we talk about money, they're really just giving you back some of your own money.
They are.
Like, it's your money. It's not their money. They stand up and clap and cheer about the budget as if they're Santa standing up and giving everybody a present. But don't forget, it's our money.
What I always find is so fun. Like, I watched it the other day. I was watching it on Oireachtas TV. There are two things of Budget Day that always amuse me. The first is that somebody is always designated as the approving nodder in chief behind the Minister for Finance. This year it was Emer Higgins from Dublin West, the Fine Gael TD, sitting there, and everything he said, she would nod sagely and solemnly. And the second thing was the standing ovation that comes at the end. And you're like, lads, you're giving yourselves a standing ovation. That the government is literally giving itself the standing ovation. It's like, here is our budget, let us all stand up and applaud it, which is not normally the point of standing ovations. Those are minor things, but they always amuse me, and it happens no matter who is in government. But I thought in general, the opposition have boxed themselves in because they can't level the criticism that I just leveled, because all they want to do is spend even more money. And so I don't blame any voter who's sitting at home going, well, I'm not getting anything else, so like I might as well take this, and if this is all that politics can give me, then I'll vote for it. It's very cynical and depressing in a way. But let's talk about some specifics. I mean, I know we were talking during the week, Sarah. You and I were having a conversation with this, and you were actually quite impressed with some of the child welfare, child benefit stuff.
Well, initially I was, because I worked it out. So 2 double payments of children's allowance for the months of November and December sounds great, but it actually works out at about €22 per child for the year, and it's only for the 1 year. So, I mean, ultimately, I think that children's allowance should have been increased in general as opposed to the lump sum payments, and it speaks to the cynicism of it, in that the government is unprepared to commit to a long-term increased payment of children's allowance, but just wants to give, funnily enough, the 2 payments in the 2 months that it's looking possible or very likely that we will be having a general election. So, there's that. But one of the criticisms I would have about this government, previous governments, and Ireland in general is that it's not an easy country in which to have more than 2 children. And from a cost point of view, they're more, we should be incentivizing people having children. We should be incentivizing people having children older or younger. And there was a couple of things that sort of seemed to lend itself towards that. So, for example, government rolled out an IVF scheme for the first time last year, as far as I know. It could have been the year before. But the criteria for that IVF scheme, that qualified you for that IVF scheme, were quite cruel, in a sense that you couldn't already have 1 child, where secondary infertility affects couples, massive amounts of couples, because people have 1 child, wait a few years, and then all of a sudden can't have another. It also didn't allow you to qualify for it if one of you had a previous child. So supposing I'm 34 and I have a fertility problem and I meet a man who had a child when he was 20, we don't qualify. I mean, come on. So they did widen the scope for who qualified for that IVF. So, I mean, okay, like I can get on board with that. A lump sum payment for the months that your child is born. That's, like, they're small, but they're something. And like they're there has been some improvements made towards childcare. So, I give out plenty, but when there moves in the right direction, I will say, okay, it seems like the budget finally noticed that there are people who are struggling with, having children, childcare, and that whole, let's just call that whole department. So in that way, I thought it was a start.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And indeed, I wrote a piece on Thursday saying that about Heather Humphreys in particular, because I think she was the one minister who came out of the budget, reputation kind of enhanced. But I do echo the criticism you made, which is that, like, this is a short-term fix. There's 2 payments right in time for the election, and then child benefit goes back to the exact same level it was. I mean, I don't understand. And again, I want to emphasize that despite what I said earlier on about the budget, I'm not necessarily criticizing the childcare package, but I don't understand why children's allowance wouldn't go up in
In
in line
general.
with other welfare payments. Everything else went up €12.
Yeah.
At €12 a week, in fact. Like, why wouldn't they put child benefit up €12 a month, even if not €12 a week? That seems to me to be a strange decision.
Yeah, and they still, and they didn't,
And
they could have fixed, I've discussed it loads of times, they've been lobbied, it's been put to them about the ECI scheme not applying to children. The 2 free preschool years only applying to children if their birthday is before 30th of December. So, I'm included in that because I have one January baby and one March baby. So like little things like that could have been, fixed. Like I have 2 kids in school, 1 child in Montessori. If your children are in junior or senior infants, they finish an hour earlier than the rest of the school, if you recall from being in school. So I need somebody to pick up for 1 hour and a Montessori or whatever. Like my childcare bill a month is €1,000. Like, and that's only till 1:30. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not even a creche. So, like, any help with those kind of things, fine, great. Like happy days. It's not enough, and it speaks to the cynicism, like I said, because it's not permanent. But
well, I've always thought there's a contradiction there, because one of the things that was said in the budget speech was that we've never had more women in the workforce. But like, if you're a woman in the workforce, and I shouldn't say this in terms of it's only being women who pay for childcare. It's not, of course, it's households. But like, if you're a 2-parent household and both parents are going out to work, then one of those parents has to make €1,000 a month just for the privilege of going to work before you pay rent, before you pay food, till lunchtime. Like that is remarkable. And I think there are bigger questions to be asked. I've said this for some time about this economic strategy we have, where we want everyone in full employment. We want 2-income households all the time, just to afford basic stuff. And one of those people is always working to stand still.
yeah.
Or in many cases, the people are working to stand still. And I don't know whether an awful lot of people wouldn't be happier with a slightly less overheated economy, with lower costs, with fewer people in work, and more 1-parent households.
But
How you go about doing that, of course, is not the work of a morning, but
no, but we also have a lot of conversations, and we've discussed this before, but like briefly, we've had conversations before as well about choice and more women than ever in the workforce. Loads of those women don't want to work. Loads of those women would prefer to stay, to be afforded the opportunity to stay at home with their children. Like, I'm really only starting to go back to work now. My first child turns 8 on Saturday. So I've been out of full-time work for 8 years. I've been there when my kids get home from school. I've done the pickups. If they're sick, the school rings me. I'm there in 3 minutes. I go and get them, whatever. I've one home sick today. But like, I know that is a luxury, like a privilege that a lot of women just don't have. But I think it's a very nice, if you can do it, it's really good for kids to have a parent at home for a while. And I think that the government should, endeavour to make that a possibility for people. Allow me to hand my tax credits over to my husband, or, I don't know, give the benefit of the tax, the credits on childcare to stay-at-home mothers as well. There's loads of things you could come up with, but like, not everybody wants to go back to work immediately. Lots of my friends have said to me, when I said I was staying at home permanently or indefinitely, they said to me, "Oh my God, the dream. If I didn't have to like pay half of a mortgage or, whatever their circumstances were, that's what I would do."
But
like, I'm 41. I'm going back to work now. I'll be working till I'm 70 probably. So like, if I took 8 years out of my career, full time out of my career, it was worth it to me. But I was lucky to be able to do that. Not everyone is. And the government just acts as if, like, we hear about choice, but like, it's only the right choice. And the right choice is to go back to work. But that's not the choice that all women want.
But do you not think, like, so much of this conversation, I think, and the reason this doesn't happen is the conversation is focused on women. And politicians are utterly terrified to say something like, many women might want to stay at home, because they think they'll sound like they're pulled out of the pages of the 1950s, and that they believe the ideal family has a woman tied to a kitchen. But the reality is, we don't have to talk about this in gender terms. I mean, there are families out there where the woman is the higher earner, and where it might suit them for the husband to stay at home with the kids. But there are lots of families out there. I think you're completely correct. I think there are loads of families in this country who do not want to be 2-income families, who are 2-income families because they feel like they have to be. And all of budgetary policy is directed towards making it easier to be a working two-income family, and almost none of it is directed towards making it easier to be a one-income family, which I think is what most people want. So the whole thing is kind of backward in a sense, in that every aspect of policy is designed to make it easier to be something that a lot of people don't want to be in the first place, which is two parents at work, children, and childcare. But all of that, I think, it relates back to this idea that politicians are terrified to suggest or hint for a second that maybe some women might want to stay at home. Yet women anytime women are asked, they
That's what they
tend to
say.
say what exactly your friend said to you. That would be the dream. It's a bizarre thing in our culture.
Yeah.
I think. Anyway, what struck you apart from Sinn Féin's weakness about the opposition response? I just thought it was very lame overall. I mean, in fairness to them, but did anything catch your eye?
Nothing really. I mean, because as people know who listen to the podcast, I was really annoyed about it, the scoliosis issue. I was pleased that Mary Lou brought it up again and, complained that there was no provision, specific provision. Now, I'm not sure what that would look like in the context of a budget, because we all know that we have money. So I don't think money is the problem when it comes to the issue of children with scoliosis not getting surgery. But I thought it was good that she brought it up. And it's not being allowed to just be washed away with all the news cycle of the budget. But I think Sinn Féin are just floundering. I felt like it was like a single transferable speech. It was the speech could have been the speech from last year, and he's just given out this and Fianna Fáil, and as you said in one of your very funny tweets, he pronounces Taoiseach like he forgets the word halfway through and just kind of abandons it. So it's like I don't know what he's
Taoiseach.
Yeah.
Taoiseach.
And he's just giving out, but it's kind of like there's no real substance to it. And I just think that the whole vibe of and I get like opposition, their job is opposition and they have to give out about the budget. They can't stand up and say great, but there's no the whole vibe of it is just tired. Sinn Féin are down, they're kicked, they don't know how to get back up. And I think that the better opposition to the budget came from some of the external advisory groups, like financial groups, or even like some of the kickback from the Restaurants Association about the no change in the 9% VAT or return, whatever. The VAT that was stronger than the opposition. But like, this is like what I said on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, that like we're finding that some of the best opposition, some of the best ideas, some of the best challenging of government policy isn't coming from the opposition anymore. It's coming from external groups, be they new movements or whatever. And this wasn't that different. Like, anything I saw that was credible, that was strong, didn't come from the opposition.
Yeah. No, I mean, I keep coming back to my Fine Gael canvasser who said to me that was the civil servant's job, not the job of the government, in relation to a lot of these issues before. And I think that attitude is kind of pervasive throughout politics. I mean, scoliosis clearly is not a financial issue. We have the money. We've just demonstrated, the government has just demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt that it has the money to fix just about any problem in the country. What it doesn't appear to have is the intellectual or managerial capacity to marshal the resources of the state in an effective way to solve one single problem. And ultimately that's what we pay them for. That's what they're there to do. I mean, I listened to Simon Harris talking about scoliosis in, I think, a Virgin Media interview with, I think, Gavin Riley during the week. And he basically said, look, I'm glad I made that promise. This was when he said he solved scoliosis all the way back in 2017, because it focused attention on the problem. But I'm sorry, I mean, and some people will listen to that and they'll say, well, he has a point. He made that promise, and that probably made the department focus a bit more on the problem. But that's not actually his job. That's not what we pay him to do. We pay him to solve these problems, to bring his officials together and say, well, who is doing what? What are these problems? What are the roadblocks? What can other departments of government do to assist us? Then go to his colleagues and say, I need this, this, and this, and solve the problem. But Simon Harris, and I thought that was one of the most revealing answers I'd ever heard from a politician, because he was basically saying, well, I drew attention to it. That's my job. And it's like my canvasser for Councillor Phil Bugler, who came to my door just now and said, in relation to the gate, well, that's the civil services job. It is not. And I think when it comes back to budget day, like I think Irish politicians think this is the beginning and end of it all. Their job is to hand out the money, and they love doing it. I mean, they're world champs at handing out money. Last week there was grants to every sports club in the country. Your local councillor was responsible for securing it. Vote for them at the next general election, and ultimately, voters are either going to keep falling for this or they're not. And I suspect they are. But that's the reason I think we have so many intractable problems.
What did you think of the €9 million for pouches for phones?
I mean, what can you say about that?
I know.
When I was in secondary school, and I'm guessing this is for secondary schools, right? Because I can't imagine that there are many primary schools. Like we had lockers, like, and you would go and you used to have those key, like, I don't know if you were in a school where boys wore them. You used to have those key rings, like the long chains that would attach to your belt with your locker key on them, maybe your keys for home. And you go to your locker and you take your books out and you put stuff in it. And most people kept like snacks and other stuff in the lockers. And the fear was that any headmaster would ever come along and ask to see inside your locker, etc., etc. Why can't people just put their phones in the lockers and be told to keep them there? And if they're found on your person, they'll be confiscated to the end of the week. Like, why do we need 9 million for special pouches?
What are they made of?
Am I being very naive?
No, but what are these pouches made of? €9 million? Are they not a plastic pouch? Like, and what's the point of it? Do you put it into that and then you put that in your locker? I don't know.
It's funny. Every time we go on holidays, if we're going somewhere where there might be water involved, my wife, who I say this with love, treats me sometimes like a small child, because she has learned from long experience that I need to be treated that way, will like come to me with like some kind of plastic pouch that I'm to put my phone in if I'm going to the beach or anywhere else that might get sand or water in. And I kind of think of it like that, is it just one of those kind of like little waterproof sachets you get? The background to this is the first time we went on holiday, Sarah, was to the Canary Islands in about 2012, 2013. And on one single day, I ran into the sea with my glasses on, got hit by a big wave, lost my glasses. And then I went back to the hotel and got into the swimming pool with my swimming togs on, and my phone was in the pocket. So I lost my phone and my glasses in one afternoon, and she's never trusted me ever since that I can look after my own stuff if we're on holiday. So she doesn't love. But I think it's those kind of pouches.
That seems fair. One day. Anyway, not realizing that the public were actually not really that into this idea, given that there was, other things potentially that money could have been used for. But I don't know. I mean, every budget has a kind of a little silly, nonsense. So this was it.
Yeah. All right, we'll leave it there. We'll stop talking about the budget now. We've talked about it for 23 minutes. You've made up your own mind. You're either going to be bribed at home or you're not. And if you're bribed, I don't blame you. I mean, who else is there to vote for? And you're getting extra money. So, I mean, fair play. There was a big vice presidential debate this week, Sarah, in the United States. Your beloved J.D. Vance was going up against Tim Walz, who some people seem to think is my beloved. What did you think of it?
Well, he was. I mean, I was excited when he was added to the ticket, and then I've been kind of underwhelmed and disappointed in him since. I thought he came across badly for the first few outings that he had, and that whole thing about cat ladies and all. He just seemed kind of like. I think the media did a good job of painting him as kind of like, not a very nice jock kind of guy that you come across in your life. However, I think he did really well in the debate. I think he came across as competent. I think he came across like he had a couple of fluffy kind of moments, but by and large, like, he came across as really on top of his brief. He had a couple of really good, like, straight punches, no doubt about it. He came across as empathetic because Tim Walz was talking about his son being a witness to a shooting. And he came across as a very genuine kind of person when he was like, I'm really sorry to hear that about your son. And he just did really well. He came across, and, you and I always talk about that, like, the likability factor was strong. Now, I will say that Tim Walz seems like a kind of a nice man as well. Like, kind of he definitely, whether it's on purpose or not, play, does that kind of like really nice bumbly kind of teacher thing going on. But I don't think he was up to the challenge, and I think he
Kind of like the
was.
granddad in Modern Family.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I'm not sure that vice presidential debates do much to swing anything either way. But I don't think anybody could come away from that, particularly, and it's like the presidential debates in the sense that if you're a person who's been watching the media, you'll have been utterly convinced that JD Vance is a big, thick-headed muppet. And if you watch this, you saw a masterclass in debating. Like, there's no doubt like that he was better. So does it change the outcome either way? I don't think so, but he was very good.
You see, I think the problem is he was too good.
How so?
Well, if you're sitting at home and you have watched Donald Trump debate Kamala Harris and deliver the performance that he did, and then you have watched JD Vance debate Tim Walz and deliver the performance that he did, you might be inclined to say, well, why isn't that guy running for president? Because I don't think Walz outshone Kamala Harris. If anything, he was slightly weaker than he was. But Vance was so much better, so much more in command of the facts, so much more articulate than Trump, so much more clearly capable and coherent than Trump. That, I mean, in some ways, I think it works to make Trump look less appealing in contrast to his own running mate, which Mike Pence never did. And I wonder, knowing what Donald Trump's personality is, whether Trump won't be inclined over the next week or two to make some kind of backhanded dig at his own VP nominee, because I don't think that would have sat well with him at all. His vice presidential nominee being that good. And yeah, I don't think these debates move the needle. I thought he was very, very impressive for what he was saying, but I also come back to my biggest sort of depression with the state of US politics, which is that they spend so much of the time agreeing. And I was watching Eric Erickson, who's the biggest US conservative talk show host based out of Georgia, yesterday talking about this, and he said, look, these are two guys now who agree on big government, increasing government spending, raising taxes. They just disagree about who it should go to. And, they basically agree there should be no abortion ban. They basically agree on sort of the vast majority of foreign policy issues. Like, what is the election actually about anymore? I know people watching this will disagree with me on this, but that was my take. I think JD Vance is very clearly somebody who's helped himself and will be in future Republican primaries. There will be one, no matter who wins. Trump is term limited, so there will be a Republican primary in 2028. JD Vance will be one of the front runners, one way or the other. I think that's the clear result of this debate, if nothing else.
Yeah, like there was a surprising level of competence. Another thing that I was really stunned by, and I don't know if I just somehow missed this, was that Waltz had said that he was in Tiananmen Square. Did you hear this? And then he was asked, and he had to say he wasn't. Cringe. Like, why does a politician say stuff like that when it's obviously going to be able to be proved that you weren't there?
Yeah, but I think Tim Walz is very, very lucky that the media are so in the tank for the Democrats, because, and they are, there's no point denying, because he now has what you might call a bullshitter problem. Like when the first time, do you remember when after he was appointed vice president, it was this whole business of whether he served in Iraq. And it turns out he didn't serve in Iraq at all. He actually left his unit as soon as he found out they were going to go to Iraq. Not blaming him for that, but he did. But he had said repeatedly, I served in Iraq. And now there's this I was in Tiananmen Square business. And I think, I can't remember them, so I'm not going to itemize them on the podcast, but there have been others as well. There have been other things where Tim Walz has said things about his own biography that are not entirely accurate. And I think, you can get away with one of those, but you can't get away with five. You shouldn't be able to get away with 5 or 6 of them. But I mean, there comes a character question there about
if it was the other way around, that would be wall to wall news across the world. And anybody who would dispute that is a liar. But I also think that it's weird. It's just weird to do stuff like that. It's weird to say that you're at that without. I can't decide whether are you so arrogant that you think you won't get caught, or are you stupid that you think that nobody's going to check that? Like it's the era of fact checking. You either, and it's not even a vague thing, you were either there or you weren't. And then he was asked about it on the debate, and he has to kind of give this weird non-answer where he talks about all the times he went to China, but he doesn't. It's cringe. I was like,
Yeah.
I can't watch this. It's just horrendous.
But I think that the problem is in your question, which is, does he think he'll get away with it? The problem is he did get away with it. And I think in the context of American elections, when you're running in a majority Democratic area in a Democratic primary, no one's that interested in interrogating a small line in the Democratic candidate's bio. Changes then when you're running for president. I mean, he got away with this story about going to Iraq for years. He's the elected governor of Minnesota. He made it to the, as high as you can get in a US state, telling that story that was false. So I think probably he did get away with it for a long time, and now only now is it starting to kind of come back as it should.
But I think that says something about his character, like and something not good.
It does. It does say something not good about his character, and it also says a lot about, as you point out, the media. Because if this was J.D. Vance, if it turned out that J.D. Vance hadn't actually gone to Harvard, or hadn't actually worked as a lawyer in a particular firm, and that was all made up, I mean, we will hear about it wall to wall. It will be the only thing we hear about, whereas Waltz gets away with that. So yeah, there's definite unfairness there.
And if my son had gone to Iraq and died, I'd be pretty pissed off that somebody is using that as a political kind of browning point for themselves when they didn't even go. Like,
J.D. Vance, of course, did actually go. He actually was in Iraq and served and was discharged honorably. So, as these things go on, I don't, Anyway, look, the other thing is, though, I wanted to say to you, I saw the same thing you did. I saw J.D. Vance dominate that debate and win it. The opinion polls didn't seem to say that, though. I mean, I've seen a few of them that showed that Waltz actually did slightly better with independents, improved his image better, and the CNN top line showed Vance won it 51-49. So I don't know whether that is evidence that you and I aren't seeing things properly, because we weren't the only ones who came to that conclusion having watched it, or whether it's just so baked in that that's just evidence these debates make no difference and people just side with their guy. Which do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that vice presidential debates are something that, people who are undecided go to watch to make their decision about what, they're going to do. But I think what it really comes down to is about expectations. And I think that if the expectation, like, he just had to kind of, like, Waltz has to just hold his own. He doesn't have to set the world on fire. He just has to not completely, wither and die on the vine. Whereas J.D. Vance has to kind of, absolutely overperform and impress. So it's because of the way the media have set them up. Do you know what I mean? So I think that polling would be a demonstration of the setup beforehand. But again, I still think that it was so clear that he was better that I don't really understand that polling.
Well, this is a point. Your point about expectations comes back to a point I have made about the Trump campaign on a couple of occasions. Because going into that Trump-Harris debate, like, they did everything basically to say that Kamala Harris was going to be lucky if she didn't collapse into a drooling puddle on the floor. Or she can't do interviews, she can't speak, she's terrible, she can't finish a thought. Donald Trump is going to destroy her. Then she turns up and she says her lines in a relatively competent fashion while he waffles about cats and dogs, and all of a sudden he loses the debate. And then with Vance, I think there was a similar dynamic. There was a similar kind of, like, J.D. Vance is going to win this debate and destroy Tim Walz, and he's phenomenal and I can't wait for the debate, etc. And then he did. And, well, that doesn't surprise you. That's what you said was going to happen. So there's a degree to which I think expectations management isn't a strength there of the Trump side. I know people are going to shout at me. People always shout at me because they say I've got Trump derangement syndrome, etc., etc. I don't think I do. Maybe I do. I don't think I do, but I just don't see it the way a lot of people seem to. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's talk about something else. Let's move away from heavy topics and talk about Philip Schofield. Did you watch?
I watched I've seen some of this. I don't want to watch Philip Schofield. I don't know why we would be platforming someone who had an inappropriate relationship with somebody who was underage and was fired as a result. I don't get why this person is still on TV. I mean,
Yeah,
I
it should
get
be said
why
now, to be clear, in
would
terms.
I get why he would be sent to an island. I just don't get why we would follow up with him after.
To be fair, just so we're clear on that, for the in case like we get sued by Philip Schofield, he met the guy in question when he was 15 years old, but the officials, Philip Schofield's position is that no relationship took place until he was 20.
Okay, so
That is the position.
he still had an inappropriate relationship with somebody that he worked with who was much younger
No, while he was married.
while he was married.
Not that matters anymore. That just doesn't matter anymore, right? That doesn't matter.
That's just a
Who
side
cares?
bit. But no, I mean you're in a position, if you're in a position of power, and you're the talent on a TV show, and I think if memory serves, this person, man that he had a relationship with was a runner or just kind of a junior person. You know, you
Junior
just
staff member.
it's a massive problem with your ability to, I don't know, behave appropriately, if you ask me. And even if it was, you know, he was married, you know, like it'd be the exact same if he was married and he was having a relationship with a young female. Like this is, you don't do that. There's a responsibility on you as a senior person not to do stuff like that. And I think the way he behaved was completely wrong and weird. And I think that's the end of that. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And now we have him on an island whinging. Okay, the
Well,
whole
to
premise
me,
of it
it's
is
one of
weird.
those. I'm conscious that I'm always doing the kind of like, imagine if it was X person instead. But I think it's really instructive. Like Philip Schofield, I think, gets what you call kind of liberal celebrity privilege. I mean, he came out in a tearful video as a homosexual, as a proud gay man. Fine, more power to you. Turns out he was having a relationship, an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. He got sacked. He resigns in disgrace. But why does he get this opportunity to come back and kind of reinvent himself as the victim, granted to him by others in the media? I mean, if that was me, or indeed anyone else, kind of like in position of not exactly cultural authority, would that be granted to us? I
No.
don't think it would. I don't think you'd have the Virgin Media running to my door to say, John McGurk, you've just been disgraced as a sexual predator. Would you like to go to an island in the South Pacific or South Indian Ocean and record your thoughts on how difficult it's been for you? Hey, come on.
But it's also so self-indulgent. Who cares what Philip Schofield thinks when he's on an island? Like, think of all the interesting people in the world, all the, people who have deep, interesting insights about things. Like, why do I care what Philip Schofield, now that he's been caught out
Well,
and fired, why do I care what he thinks while he's poking at some rocks like as if he's Tom Hanks in Castaway? Who gives a shit what he thinks?
well, 1.5 million people watch this stuff, so
But
clearly
that's
some people.
oh no,
I don't know why.
no. I will no. 1.5 million people watched it because it's weird. They didn't watch it because they think he has something interesting to say. They watched it because he was disgraced, and it's kind of morbid fascination about what he's going to say. But the idea that he's just kind of left on this island, and the whole premise of it, to me, it's just bizarre and self-indulgent. I mean, like, why does anybody think we care what he has to say? What maybe like maybe I'd like to hear, what would be interesting would be to hear what his wife and daughters felt when they found out that he was gay and was having an inappropriate relationship with a 20-year-old that worked for him. Like maybe
That is the kind of thing. Like,
that's an interesting conversation. Maybe their story could be told.
I think it's fascinating that just doesn't happen, because I mean I can't imagine anything more horrifying than to be to find out that you're not. I mean, it's one thing for your partner, I'd imagine, to have an affair. It's quite another thing for your partner to have an affair while revealing that they've been keeping a secret about their sexual orientation from you for years and years and years. I mean, it must be devastating. And then watch him be celebrated in public for it. He's so brave. He's so brave for coming out. And I mean, spare me. I think what he did was one of the most cowardly, shitty things a person can do to the people closest to you in the world, who are your family. And I think putting your sexual orientation first and saying, oh well, I have to live my truth now. I mean, go away.
Yeah.
That's
And
what I
also,
think. I know
but
that others will
also,
disagree with me,
but
that's
also
what I think.
because he's famous, they don't get any place to hide. It's not like in the privacy of their own home, he came home one day and he's just an average guy. He's just an accountant, right? And he came home and told them this secret, and they get to process it in their own time and think about it. And, okay, like obviously if you're an adult and your dad comes home and tells you that he's gay or whatever, that's quite shocking. It's quite sad. You love your dad. You think, oh, he's kept this secret all his life. Isn't that sad? Whatever. But no, this was all about him. And this new documentary is, to me, just further evidence that it's the Philip Schofield show all the time. And be damned what anybody else's feelings are. But, I'm a star and I'm a celebrity and it's important that people hear from me. Well, I don't want to. I don't care about what he has to say. I don't think he has anything important to share with us. I think he has a massive, massive problem with judgment, a massive problem with boundaries, and he should be at home trying to, make sure that his family are okay after the humiliation they've been put through for the last 5 years, instead of going off to an island and poking rocks and crying. Idiot.
Preach, sister, preach. Anyway, speaking of pervs, Philip Schofield, to be fair, is on the kind of lower end of the perv range. He's a guy who had what we believe to be illegal, if not entirely appropriate, relationship with a work colleague. This lad P Diddy, or whatever he's called, was he once Puff Daddy? Is he now P Diddy? I don't know.
Yeah.
You've
Oh my
been
God.
following that case.
You're like someone's granddad. P Diddy. Was it Puff? Who? Sean Combs is his name. He had a variety of names, stage names. I think Puff Daddy, P Diddy, Diddy, whatever. Anyway, Diddy, he did. He is a pervert. Turns out he has. I think that this is going to be a massive, massive story. So basically, he is in jail. He is multiple counts of sexual abuse, rape against, I think, over 100 victims, some of which are children. And at a press conference this week, the police came out and said that there was a list of names that aided and abetted, participated, encouraged, or at the very minimum stood by and watched this, and that the names on this list are going to be shocking. So I think this is the start of something really, really, really big, and Harvey Weinstein size, if not bigger. And these people, fame and whatever, I don't know what it does, but this looks to be something very, very dark. And again, for legal reasons, I probably shouldn't point the finger at people particularly, but very high profile male and female celebrities, people will know who I'm talking about. One couple in particular are being suggested and actually named on some shows in America. And this could be the fall of the century.
So the accusation here, as I understand it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because I honestly, I'm only picking up what you kind of hear in your peripheral sort of vision or audio. But what I've picked up from this story is that basically this guy is basically organizing sex parties, or parties at which people are there for the purpose of the guests to have sex with, even if it's not officially a sex party. It's kind of like, there's a fun room upstairs if you want to go and enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
And people are being trafficked into these situations. That's basically...
Yeah, and some of them are children.
It's Epstein-esque.
Yeah. And that some of them are children, and that also in some cases there was record deals done on the basis of children being offered for these parties.
Yeah, that stuff very serious, and that's the kind of thing that you read about in sort of like QAnon conspiracy theories. And I'm not saying that to suggest there's any conspiracy theory about this at all. I'm saying, but that's the kind of thing you anyway.
I think that like what it looks to me so far, and obviously it's early enough, but what it looks so far is that it seems highly unlikely that Puff Daddy is not going to jail for an indefinite amount of time. The question now is who else was at these parties, who saw, who stood by, who watched, who knew. And that is going to pull, I think, a number of very famous people down.
Yeah, well, I mean, when it comes to stuff like that, it's not enough to just say, I was there, but I didn't partake. I mean, if there are crimes of that nature being committed, and you can't deny you were aware of them, and you didn't come forward about them, you've almost certainly committed a crime.
Like
Particularly in the US, that takes this stuff very, very seriously.
but John, like I've known you a long time, you've known me. There's no planet on the world that if I went to the most fabulous, exciting celebrity party and was witness to a child being sexually abused or raped, that I would go, well, they're famous, so I'm not going to say anything. Are you joking?
Mhm.
Like, maybe you'd sit there and say, okay, these 20-year-old girls look like they're kind of, not being treated very nicely by these men, and this all seems a bit icky. Okay, fine. Maybe you'd sit back and go, well, I'm not coming back to this party again after witnessing this. This is horrible. Those girls are being badly treated. But a child, there's no way you wouldn't go to the police. No way. Like, but obviously people didn't, because these parties, P. Diddy's white party, do you not remember that? Like there used to hear this kind of, he used to have these Oscar parties and different parties or whatever. So what they're suggesting is that at these parties had an element of this. So it seems like a lot of people had to have known that something was going on. And now there's all this stuff coming out about, that people who knew and people who were suggesting it in their song lyrics and saying, like, it's the same issue I have with Harvey Weinstein, which spare me, Oprah, your kind of whinging and crying and feminism, when apparently everybody in Hollywood knew this was going on and you didn't do anything, and you're the most powerful woman in the world and you just sat back and did nothing. So no. And people had to have known.
I remember in particular, I was going to say, I remember in particular Meryl Streep's claims of innocence. I found them quite hard to believe. She's the most powerful actress in Hollywood. On the books of that agency, she'd never heard anything about it. I find that difficult to believe.
I remember Courtney Love was being interviewed at like some MTV Awards or something like that, and she was drunk, obviously. And the journalist said to her, "What would your years before it came out? They said, what would your advice be to a young actress in Hollywood?" And she said, "Don't go alone to Harvey Weinstein's couch." That's the level that it was at. But everybody was so shocked. Now if you're not, you're complicit. You're just going along with it and saying nothing. So if you were at a party where there was children, one of the boys, a boy of 8 years of age, is one of the victims.
But to some extent, here's where I'll flip this. Are we not all, to some extent, complicit? Because, like, you said at the start, I sounded like a granddaddy not knowing who P. Diddy or Puff Daddy was. I mean, I know of the individual.
Yeah.
I've seen enough of the individual over the years. I've seen some of the music videos. I've seen some of the celebrity appearances. The entire public image, I would argue. I mean, and I'll name somebody else who, as far as I know, was entirely innocent of any crimes, but has a similar public image and is a beloved figure, is Snoop Dogg. And it is, wherever these guys go, oftentimes there are like a chain of bikini-clad women around them, either paid to be there or they're voluntarily, almost certainly paid to be there. The image of these guys is, we got bitches. Like that is the image, and I'm using the language that's used, and you like, and then you say about a person going to these parties and they see kind of like 20-year-old women writhing around. Are they to assume that there's something going wrong? Are they to assume this is just an extension of the public image? I think to some extent society is complicit by kind of glorifying that kind of image to begin with, to be honest. Maybe I'm phrasing that badly, but I think there's a point there that we're not really discussing.
No, I think you're right. And sometimes, like, because we're the same age, that there was a kind of a period, say in the like early noughties, where that kind of rap music and a lot of those songs are really popular. And sometimes, on YouTube or something, an old music video will come up and I'll kind of be like, oh yeah, I remember that song when I was 20 or whatever. And you click into it and then you'll watch the video and be like, God, I never really noticed when I was younger that this is really sexual. Like, you know what I mean? There's I'm not going to, gravel pit. I remember it came up on my, I can't remember, the Wu-Tang Clan or one of those bands, and the video came up and I clicked on it and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this song when I was younger. And I watched the video and I was like, how did I not kind of spot how sexual this was at the time? I just didn't notice it. They were all like that. It was all, as you say, women in bikinis and, highly sexual and calling women bitches and hoes, and, nobody called it out. But John, this is children. Like, this is
I'm not taking away from that point.
This is a pedophile. Like, this isn't, treating women badly and, hoes and bitches. This is a child. So if
No,
it
but
turns out
I
to
guess
be, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, that, we there was a glorification of rap and, women, and some of this is to do with that. But there's over 100 victims, and some of them, more than one, are children. So this is obviously a
yeah. I
person who was
mean,
just having sex with men, women, and children.
yeah, I guess what I'm saying, you're correct, but just to reiterate it for the viewers, and because I think it's a point worth exploring in general, is that we are talking about those videos, and one is, for example, more recent than the early noughties, is the Blurred Lines video that launched Emily Ratajkowski's career because she got naked in it, and she had to ride around with the guy. Do you remember it? Do you remember the video I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And then there was the tattoo video, and all of those, all of that culture creates an environment of general sexual permissiveness. And I'm not a prude. I'm not in any way a prude. I mean, go do your thing, whatever that thing
Yeah.
is. If it makes you happy, go do it. But when you start like creating an environment in Hollywood of expected sexual permissiveness, it lowers people's inhibitions. It lowers people's barriers to entry. It starts making people doubt themselves. I mean, one of the things that's really interesting about porn culture and the whole row about sex education at the moment is the pressures young women feel to engage in activities that they're not actually comfortable engaging in,
Yeah.
because they feel like they're obliged to do it. And part of that is that kind of like when you take down the fences and barriers that say, actually some of, and you create a kind of culture of sexual permissiveness, a lot of people end up getting coerced into doing stuff that they're not comfortable doing. Or maybe coerced is the wrong word, but end up turning a blind eye to stuff they shouldn't turn a blind eye to, or kind of feeling that things are normal that aren't normal. And I think it starts at the top with that culture. And, anyway, that doesn't take away from the specific crimes against children, but I think in general, there's a point there that's not being discussed about all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right in the sense that it creates an environment within which a predator like this can hide in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there's an ownership that society needs to take about that. But I think that this is a story that's going to run and run, and we will be talking about this again, because when the list of names comes out, there's absolutely no way on earth that there's not a series of really famous people on that. And I think as well that some of the people who are victims, as underage people, are going to be famous people who are famous now as well.
Oh yeah, that's a good bet, I would suggest. All right, was there anything in Ireland that caught your eye during the week?
There was an interesting story yesterday about an assault case. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Goat and Charlie Chalk, the pub. So
Yes,
Charlie Chalk is a prominent publican, Charlie Chalk. So two of his children were remanded on bail for an assault. They got involved in an argument, but a very violent assault. Now, file has gone to DPP, and like I'm sure this will feature in the news over the next couple of months. It's back on the 3rd of December. But the female, Alison Chalk, is alleged to have not just assaulted a number of people, but kicked a man in the head and bit him in the face, a 40-year-old woman with 3 children, as I understand. I mean, have we all lost our mind?
It's bizarre.
No, but
We should say, of course, people are innocent until proven guilty, and these are charges, but nonetheless, fairly serious charges.
I said alleged. I said alleged that this is. I'm reading from the news, the breaking news website, or the breakingnews.ie website about this incident. But the point is that, like, is it just my imagination, or are these kind of attacks just getting more and more violent? Like we've spoken before about, one punch attacks, and, a couple of drunken Egypts, and they get into a bit of an argument, one punch, the other falls over, hits his head and whatever. But is it my imagination, or is the level of violence, biting in the face, really?
Yeah, well, look, we didn't talk last week about actually, because it happened this week and we haven't gotten around to talking about it, which was the absolutely horrendous. I mean, what you're describing is horrendous, but somehow it almost even pales into significance behind the case of the woman who was allegedly held hostage and tortured in Dublin by 8 men.
Yeah. But this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Is it becoming more violent, or are we just paying more attention?
No, it's definitely becoming more violent. I mean, look, there's something primal about the idea that 8 men would kidnap a woman and torture her with blow torches and bats and pliers and break bones and all of that sort of stuff. There's
Mm.
something there's something medieval about it.
Yeah.
There's something that says this isn't something that happens in modern civilization, yet here it is happening allegedly in the center of Dublin City, in an apartment surrounded by lots of other apartments in the middle of our society. And there's something about those stories that just sets a particular alarm, I think, setting off in people's heads, or there should be, that something isn't right.
Mm.
Something has gone very badly wrong. It's not even, I mean, we all know, Sarah, we live in a society where there are going to be criminals.
Yeah.
So long as there are laws against drugs, there are going to be people who try and get around those by selling them illegally. Even if drugs are legal, there will still be those who do that. There are always going to be criminals. There are always going to be violent people. But, I'm always reminded of the title of that biopic of Martin Cahill, the general. It was called Ordinary Decent Criminal. Do you remember that? Now, I'm not suggesting that Martin Cahill was a decent criminal or that any of his, and because he did have victims that they were somehow legitimate. But I am saying the idea of a criminal of that era doing something like that to a defenseless woman who's tied up, I don't think that would have even happened in that era. Maybe I'm horrendously naive, but I think things are getting an awful lot worse.
I think they mostly did things to men most of the time. But yeah, I mean that story just leapt out at me because, and again, like obviously, it's all alleged, but just a level of violence between people that seems to be escalating, and I think that there's a phenomenon at play there that we haven't quite figured out yet.
Do you think, and not to get all philosophical, but do you think it's kind of linked to an inherent lack of a growing lack of respect for kind of human life? Because I think it is. I think one of the things that strikes me about the torture incident is that it is, of course, alleged to be a drug related incident.
Yeah.
And what struck me about it was the parallels between the kind of thing you see in Mexico and other countries in South America, where horrendous things are done to people just to make a point. You see reports of people being decapitated with chainsaws, or all sorts of absolutely horrendous. Like, the more barbaric, the better, to make the point that the cartel is to be feared.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether we're seeing some of that stuff creeping into kind of like the glorification of it amongst kind of almost all the charged people, and we should say they are charged, not convicted, but all the people charged with that crime are in their early 20s. And I wonder whether there is not a problem there that we're not addressing. I don't know how we could address it, but it's there.
No, I mean, do you remember a couple of years ago that young man who was involved in some kind of gangland criminality, and he was murdered and his body was cut up, remember, and put in different bags?
Yep.
Do you remember that? Like, I remember that was a real moment of like shock. But I think that certainly that the level of violence within criminalities seems to be escalating, and exactly like you say, that there's a kind of almost like a shock and awe element to it now that's deliberate. I don't know where it's coming from.
Well, we probably won't solve it this week. There's actually loads we could have talked about this week that we didn't get to. We didn't get to the modular homes. We didn't get to the Oireachtas gates, mainly because I shouted at a Fine Gael canvasser about them before we started the podcast. I'm feeling bad about that. I'm feeling like I should ring up the candidate and go, I shouted at one of your canvassers, and I just lost my time.
Well, I thought we always say that we're not mean to canvassers. I thought that was one of our things.
Yeah, well, just got me at a bad moment. What can I say? I'm owning up. I'm saying I'm sorry. So if you are that canvasser, I apologise. But nonetheless, I don't take it back. I don't take it back, Sarah. He should have said, don't stand here and tell me that it's the civil service's fault. They're in charge of
No. That's an absurd thing to say.
Anyway, on that happy and apologetic note, that is our podcast for this week. Sarah and I love the fact that you watch, listen, and comment upon us. You're always much nicer to her than you are to me, though. That's the one thing I have to say. Although you're also meaner to Sarah than you are to me, so kind of like, can we even that out? Be meaner to me and nicer to me. That's my request. But you may choose to obey it or ignore it as you wish. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. I've been John. She's been Sarah. That's been the week that really was. Take care.